Gandharika Giridhari Shri Shri Radha Govind Ji Ki Jai, Shri Shri Radha Vinod Bihari Ji Ki Jai. Jai Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Sudarshan Chakra Ji Ki Jai. Jai Shri Giriraj Govardhana Ki Jai. Jai Shri Shri Nitai Gauranga Ki Jai. Jai Shri Shri Nrsimha Bhagavan Ki Jai. Jai Nitya Pravishtom Vishnupad Paramahansasta Tarasata Shri Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nitya Pravishtom Vishnupad Paramahansa Asto Tarasata Shri Srila Bhakti Rakshak Shri Dhara Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Nitya Pravishtom Vishnupad Paramahansa Asto Tarasata Shri Srila Bhakti Vedanta Narayana Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Shri Shri Rupa Nuga Guru Varga Ki Jai. Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jiva Gopala Bhakta Dasa Raghunath Sada Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai. Srila Swarup Damodar Roy Ramananda Gaur Parsila Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Sikaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Adi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Navadvip Dham Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopi Go Govardhan Dvadashavanatmaka Shri Braj Mandala Dham Ki Jai. Shyama Kunda Radha Kunda Yamuna Ganga Tulsi Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Govinda Radha Gopinath Radha Madan Mohan Jiu Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Gokulananda Radha Shyama Sundar Radha Raman Radha Damodar Jiu Ki Jai. Srimati Lalita Vishaka Adi Ashta Saki Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Rupa Manjari Rati Manjari Adi Manjari Vrinda Ki Jai. Srimati Vrinda Devi Ki Jai. Srimati Purnamasi Yogamaya Devi Ki Jai. Shri Gopishwar Mahadeva Ki Jai. Sarva Bhishta Pradata Giriraj Govardhana Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Sudarshan Chakra Jiu Ki Jai. Jai Shri Jagannath Puri Kshetra Dhama Ki Jai. Bhakti Vigna Vinashana Shri Nrsimha Dev Ki Jai. Bhakta Prabhu Shri Prahlad Maharaj Ki Jai. Charo Dham Charo Sampradaya Charo Acharya Ki Jai. Akaramat Raj Shri Chaitanya Mat Ki Jai. Aur Ananya Shaka Mat Samuha Ki Jai. Shri Vishva Vaishnav Raj Sabha Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai. Tribhuvana Pavana Harinama Samkirtana Ki Jai. Tribhuvana Mangala Harinama Prabhu Ki Jai. Hare Krishna Maha Mantra Ki Jai. Sachinandana Gaura Hari Ki Jai. Shri Nityananda Mahajana Ki Jai. Shri Pancha Tattva Ki Jai. Samavita Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Samagata Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Nitai Gaur Premanandi. Hari Hari. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Jutaha Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yat Kripa Tamaham Vande Shri Gurun Dinataranam. Vansha kalpatarubhascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Namo Mahabhadanaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namre Gaura Chishe Namah. He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatapate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vrindai Tulsi Devai Priyai Keshavasya Cha Krishna Bhakti Prade Devi Satyavachai Namo Namaha Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Shaktikam Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Adi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. I'm first offering my unlimited Dandavat pranams and my Shraddha Pushpanjali at the lotus feet of my most worshipable beloved Gurudev, Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Astotarasata Sri Srila A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada. And then I'm offering my same unlimited Dandavat pranams and my Shraddha Pushpanjali at the lotus feet of my most worshipable beloved Siksha Gurudevs, Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Asto Tarasata Sri Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Goswami Maharaj and Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Asto Tarasata Sri Srila Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. My Dandavat pranams to all of my Sri Rupanuga Guru Varga and my Dandavat pranams to all the Vaishnavas and all the Vaishnavis. We're continuing our study of the 12 essays written by Srila Sachidananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur, where he is telling about the 6 favorable and the 6 unfavorable activities for bhakti mentioned in the 2nd and 3rd shloka of Sri Upadeshamrita. And we have come to the 4th item in the favorable items of bhakti, Utsaha Nishchayat Dhairyat Tat Tat Karma Pravartanat. We are currently studying Tat Tat Karma Pravartanat, which means that to do all activities that are favorable for bhakti. So, you know what the activities that are favorable for bhakti are? The 64 limbs of bhakti. Have you heard of the 64 limbs of bhakti?
Yeah.
Where did Srila Prabhupada mention these in his books?
Negative instruction.
No.
So,
Didn't mention the 64 limbs.
Upadeshamrita?
No, that's the same book, Nectar of Instruction. I'll give you a hint. The first word is nectar. Prabhupada's books.
Nectar of the ocean?
Yes.
I get confused. I thought they were the same kind of.
No. They're two separate books. They're both written by Srila Rupa Goswami, and they both have the word nectar in the title because Amrita means nectar. So Upadesh Amrita means the nectar of Upadesh. Upadesh means instructions. And the nectar of devotion means Bhakti Rasa Amrita Sindhu. Here's the word Amrita. The ocean, Sindhu, of the nectar, the Amrita of Bhakti Rasa. Bhakti Rasa. This is the title that Rupa Goswami gave to his book. So Bhakti Rasa Amrita Sindhu is the full study of the subject of Bhakti Rasa. Right? Right? Bhakti Rasa. So, we old devotees, we knew this word from the beginning of our Krishna consciousness. The word Bhakti Rasa. We heard this before. Bhakti Rasa. But we were not very educated in the subject of Bhakti Rasa. So, Srila Prabhupada, out of his causeless mercy, he gave the essential books for us to begin our journey in Krishna consciousness. He gave the essential books. This book, named The Nectar of Devotion, is his summary study of the entire book called Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu of Rupa Goswami. So that book is very large. And it is very, very authoritative throughout the entire book. Rupa Goswami is quoting many, many different verses from the various Vedic literatures. And the main topic that is being discussed is how the living entity can revive his eternal relationship with the Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna, by performing what Prabhupada would call devotional service. But the word devotional service is derived from bhakti. The word bhakti means to serve Krishna with love and devotion, favorably. So bhakti also means devotion. So Prabhupada simplified and he said devotional service. But the whole science of devotional service, it's actually a science, which was presented by Rupa Goswami, how to practice in the beginning stages. And then there are 64 different divisions of practicing bhakti yoga. 64. Originally, there are 9. We went through that the other day. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmanivedanam. We went through that the other day. But those 9 limbs of bhakti, Nava Vidha Bhakti, you know Navadvip? Have you ever been to Navadvip?
Yeah.
Navadvip has the word Navadvip means what?
9
islands. That's right, correct. Those 9 islands are representing the 9 limbs of bhakti. Shravanam, hearing, kirtanam, chanting, etc. Those 9 islands are the 9 limbs of bhakti. So this is the eternal process. When Prahlad Maharaj was speaking with his father Hiranyakashipu, he quoted this verse. He says, Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu, Smaranam Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmanivedanam. Then he said after that, Iti Pumsarpita Vishnu Bhaktis Chain Nava Lakshana. Anyone who worships Vishnu by these 9 symptoms, these 9 activities, Nava Lakshana, Nava means 9, like Navadvip, Kriyeta Bhagavatyadha Tanmanye Aditam Uttamam. Prahlad Maharaj told Hiranyakashipu, I think that that person who worships Vishnu by performing the 9 limbs of bhakti, he is the best amongst all human beings. Tanmanye Aditam Uttamam. Uttamam means topmost. So these are the authoritative statements in Srimad Bhagavatam that there are 9 limbs of bhakti. There are 9 methods by which bhakti, devotional service, can be given to the Supreme Lord from the living entity. But now, Rupa Goswami and actually Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, you know that Rupa Goswami met Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in a place called Prayag. At that time it was called Allahabad because the Muslims were ruling, so they named it Allahabad. But actually it's known forever as Prayag. So in that place, Prayag, then Srila Rupa Goswami, he sat with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and Mahaprabhu instructed him for 9 days. That conversation that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had with Rupa Goswami, various subject matters, is recounted in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. Madhya Lila, chapters 19 through 25. Actually, this is Rupa Goswami. He was instructed by Mahaprabhu, and then Sanatana Goswami was instructed by Mahaprabhu in another place called Varanasi. And he was instructed by Mahaprabhu personally for 2 months. So we have those instructions in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami has given that. And when Srila Prabhupada wrote the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, he extracted those 2 conversations from Chaitanya Charitamrita and he put them in his teachings of Lord Chaitanya, because these were directly spoken by Lord Chaitanya. And also 3 other conversations. One by Ramananda Roy Sambad. That was Mahaprabhu with Ramananda Roy. But Mahaprabhu was making Ramananda Roy speak. See. Then also when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took sannyas and later he came to Puri for the first time, he met Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. Who was Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya? Very great scholar, known throughout all of India. And he was the teacher of Mayavad interpretation of the Vedanta Sutra. So, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the long story, he converted him. And he taught him what is the real meaning of Vedanta. And later on, when Mahaprabhu came to the same place, Varanasi, where he instructed Sanatana Goswami, then Mahaprabhu instructed the leader of all the Mayavadi sannyasis named Prakashananda Saraswati. And he converted all of them, thousands of Mayavadi sannyasis. He converted them all to Vaishnavas. So those are the 5 conversations in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that Srila Prabhupada took from there and he compiled them in one book, Teachings of Lord Chaitanya. So all devotees should know this. They should understand this very clearly. So, in the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, when Mahaprabhu is instructing Sanatana Goswami, then he explains to him that these 9 limbs of bhakti, they have been expanded into 64 items. Okay? So those 64 items are clearly mentioned in the Prabhupada's book, Nectar of Devotion. Now, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur is explaining how to do bhakti in a favorable way, constantly engaged in bhakti to Krishna in a favorable way. So he's explaining those 64 limbs. He's mentioning them, the whole 64. Now he's explaining one by one. So this is a very helpful study for us. Yes. And we're familiar. If I read to you the whole list, you will say, yes, I've heard that before. Yes, I've heard that before. 64 limbs. Many of them are pertaining to worshipping the deities, performing kirtan in front of the deities and all of that, dancing in front of the deities. There are many, many items concerning archan, because archan is one of the limbs of bhakti. So, that's a little introduction to where we are up to now. Yeah, so much we covered, which was so important, especially yesterday. Okay. Now we're going to go to the 6th item of the 64. We're only up to the 6th item. This 6th item is renouncing sense enjoyment for the sake of affection for Krishna. Now Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains, it is the duty of a bhakti sadhak. That means a practitioner of bhakti. It is the duty of a bhakti sadhak to give up all types of bhog for the sake of Krishna. What does bhog mean?
Joy.
Enjoyment. Bhog. Do you know when we offer our cooked foods to Krishna, before they are placed on the altar, they're called bhoga, right? The word bhog, what does it mean? This Sanskrit word bhog. It means objects to be enjoyed. Bhog. That's why it's called bhog. The items that have not yet been offered to the Lord are called bhog. But when the Lord accepts those items through the mantras and prayers of the devotee, then what are those same items called?
Prashad.
Yes, they're called prashad, because Krishna has enjoyed them. He has taken that bhog and enjoyed it with his senses. And because he's all powerful, he has given his remnants, his mercy to us, to also eat, to also accept, and to purify ourselves. So, the subject of bhog, do you know that in the Russian language it's very interesting? You know the word for God in the Russian language? Bhog. Yes, it means God. But also, that word, there's another word that we are very, very familiar with. What is that word? Bhagavan. Bhaga. Bhog, B-H-O-G-A, Bhog, and Bhaga, B-H-A-G-A. So the Russian word for God, coming, because their languages come from Sanskrit. So their Russian word is Bhog. But that also can be derived from Bhagavan. You see. So, Krishna says, we were talking about this verse in another class. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Bhoktaram Jagya Tapasam. That means, I am the Bhokta. Bhokta means the enjoyer of Bhog. But here Krishna says, I am the Bhoktaram, I am the enjoyer of all yagyas, sacrifices. I am the enjoyer. And also, tapasam, all austerities. I am the enjoyer. It is Krishna who is meant to enjoy the efforts of the living entities, to perform sacrifices, to perform austerities. So this sixth item of Bhakti Yoga, Jai Shri Guru Gauranga, Shri Srila Govinda Ki Jai. Renouncing sense enjoyment for the sake of affection for Krishna. So he says it is the duty of a bhakti sadhak to give up all types of bhog for the sake of Krishna. Bhog means sense enjoyment. That's what bhog means, sense enjoyment. The objects that our senses want to enjoy, the items that are very dear to us, they are to be offered to Krishna and accepted in the form of prasad in a moderate quantity suitable for sustaining one's life. So, if somebody does not offer to Krishna these items that they want to take and enjoy for their senses, then they are transgressing the laws of the universe. And actually, in the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna very clearly explains this, that if someone eats food, but they do not offer it to the Lord, they're eating sin, he says, directly. They're only eating sin. It will contaminate. So the thing is, we have things in our life that give us pleasure, give us happiness. They're nourishing to our senses. But a real devotee, a bhakti sadhaka, he gives up all types of enjoyment for the sake of Krishna. Actually, in one sense, he's not giving up the enjoyment because Krishna also gives him in the form of prasadam. But that is meant to be enjoyed by the sadhaks because it is serving Krishna. When you take Krishna prasadam, it is not enjoying. It's called serving. Prasad seva. The prasad is Krishna. It is his mercy. So it is non-different than Krishna. So when we take prasad, we are serving Krishna with our senses. Now the next item, number 7, is called Tirtha Vas. Tirtha Vas. To reside in a place that is related to Sri Krishna, Krishna Tirtha, it is a limb of sadhana. To reside in a holy place where it is connected with Krishna. So that is one of the limbs of bhakti sadhana, bhakti sadhana. Now, if one resides in Dwarka, in Mathura, in Vrindavan, on the bank of the Ganga, on the bank of the Yamuna, or at the pastime places of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, then the remembrance of Krishna will be perpetually ever fresh. What more does the sadhak need? This is the question Bhaktivinoda Thakur is asking. What more does the sadhak need than this? Number 8. Accepting according to one's need. Through practical activities that are favorable for the practice of bhakti, one is to engage in earning only as much wealth as needed for maintaining one's livelihood. By desiring more than is needed, bhakti will disappear. What did he just say? Did you catch that? What did he say?
But by desiring more than is needed, bhakti will disappear.
Yes. Very good. Very good. You hear good, Ranga. So, if a sadhak accepts less wealth than is needed, then his practice of sadhana will become weak due to those needs not being satisfied. Gurudev told directly, this is exactly what he's telling here. Gurudev explained this. So, one of the devotional principles is to accept according to one's need. So we see that Krishna also protects the devotees from becoming too much covetous of wealth. Krishna, he does that with most devotees I've seen. And I've also seen when devotees get too much wealth, a lot of times their bhakti suffers. Not all cases, but it's rare if their bhakti does not suffer. In most cases, their bhakti goes down. So, but that means if the person is very much desiring more than is needed, then the bhakti will disappear. Because that's averse. Those kinds of desires are averse to bhakti. So, through practical activities that are favorable for the practice of bhakti, one is to engage in earning only as much wealth as needed for maintaining one's livelihood. Now comes item number 9, observing Ekadashi. One must attentively observe Ekadashi. When one gives up all enjoyment and practices bhajan on the occasion of Ekadashi, once every fortnight, gradually the practice of bhajan becomes continuous. So what did he say there? Ranga, did you catch that?
If you practice Ekadasi faithfully,
Yes.
the practice of bhakti will become easier?
No.
Not easier.
No, he's saying one must attentively observe Ekadashi. And when one gives up all enjoyment and practices bhajan on the occasion of Ekadashi, once every fortnight, that's once every 2 weeks. Okay? So when one does that, gives up all enjoyment on the occasion of Ekadashi, we give up the enjoyment of taking grains and everything else. We fast, we do that kind of fasting on Ekadashi, and we try to increase our chanting and so forth. You see? So when one does that, when one gives up the enjoyment and practices bhajan on the occasion of Ekadashi once every fortnight, gradually the practice of bhajan becomes continuous. You see? This is a way of gradually becoming more and more accomplished in bhajan, in following the practices of bhakti. You see? So Ekadashi is very, very important. Number 10, serving tulsi and others. Now, through the worship of Mirobalam and Peepal trees, we were reading this before. This is called Amalaki and Ashvata. So Amalaki is a fruit that is also used in a lot of Ayurvedic recipes. Very powerful, Amalaki. And the Peepal is from the Ashvata tree. I'm not exactly sure. The Ashvata may be the banyan tree, but it may also be fig tree. At any rate, through the worship of these trees, and also tulsi, and cows, and brahmanas, and Vaishnavas, through the worship of all these, one's sinful reactions are vanquished. Through this, one attains the mercy of Bhagavan. So how important is it that we worship Tulsi every day? Through this worship, we will attain Krishna's mercy. Now, he comes, that was item number 10, and now Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur speaks on the necessity of observing the 10 aforementioned rules. That's these list of 10. He says, these aforementioned 10 limbs of bhakti are prerequisites for performing bhajan. What's a prerequisite?
Ahead of time.
What?
It has to be done before you. It has to be done before you can start doing actual bhajan. That's what.
Yes.
Something that has to be done before.
Yes. A prerequisite means that you have to have some requirement. Some requirement has to be met by you before you can do something. That's called a prerequisite. Okay? So these 10 limbs of bhakti are prerequisites for performing bhajan. Attaining bhajan and Bhagavan is very difficult for those who neglect these limbs in the initial stage. Yes? So that's why Prabhupada engaged us right from the very beginning in performing all these 10 limbs. He goes on and he says, the sadhak ought therefore to first take shelter of Sri Guru and accept diksha and siksha from him. One must follow the conduct of the sadhus and accept instructions on their siddhanta. In order for one's life to be permeated with Krishna consciousness, one is to reside in a Krishna tirtha. And for the sake of attaining Krishna, give up all sense gratification. Through practical conduct, one is to earn or collect only as much wealth as needed to maintain one's life, and which is favorable for bhakti. For the sake of bhakti, one should, according to the rules, observe days like Ekadasi and Janmashtami. One must honor Vaishnavas and other personalities and objects related to Krishna. In this way, it is necessary to observe these 10 rules. And along with these rules, one's bhakti sadhana will not be stable. Okay, here's the sentence. Along with these rules, one's bhakti sadhana will not be stable if one does not observe the 10 prohibitions mentioned below. So, the first in the 64 limbs of bhakti are these 10, and now the next 10 are prohibitions that you should not do. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur is explaining that along with following these 10 limbs, if a sadhaka does not observe the 10 prohibitions which are now going to be mentioned, then he will never be stable in his bhakti sadhana. So now we're going to that. Here's the list. First item, the association of Mayavadis and atheists is to be renounced. A sadhaka ought not to associate with persons averse to Bhagavan. If they are averse, you should not associate. Although he will inevitably meet such people in ordinary dealings, he is to deal with them only until his work is finished. You see? Those in whose hearts the swarup of devotion to Sri Krishna has not yet awakened, those persons remain full of pride as they have taken shelter of jnana and karma, so they remain full of pride. Their swarup of devotion to Krishna has not yet awakened. Those persons, they are therefore averse to Bhagavan. They are averse to Bhagavan. And those who engage in serving many devas and devis, that means demigods, and those who are mayavadis, who are thirsty for impersonal jnana, and those who are atheists, who oppose the Vedas, they are all averse to Bhagavan. So this must be renounced, their association. But remember what he just said here. He says, although a sadhak will inevitably meet such people in ordinary dealings, he is to deal with them only until his work is finished. You see? So that does not count as association. Now, the next item. One must refrain from making many disciples and reading many types of shastras. One who has no faith in Shuddha Bhakti, he must not be accepted as a disciple. If someone does not have faith in Shuddha Bhakti, they should not be accepted as a disciple. Understand? Have we seen persons being accepted as disciples by various individuals without really having faith in Shuddha Bhakti? Yes, we have. And in practically every single case, that disciple leaves within a short time. So, yes. By accepting such a person who has no faith in Shuddha Bhakti, by accepting such a person as a disciple, the Bhakti Sampradaya becomes polluted. The whole Sampradaya becomes polluted. One's Bhakti will diminish by starting big projects, like arranging grand festivals and other such activities. They are therefore to be renounced. Now, how do we understand this point? What do you think, Rangalata Didi? No, what do you think? What do you think?
No, well, I think it means, why are you arranging the grand festival? You know, is it to please Krishna and the Vaishnavas? Is it to hold yourself up like, I'm able to pull this off, or things like that? What is the reasoning behind why you want to hold the grand festival? We think we have grand festivals here.
Right, that's why we're discussing this.
Yes.
We celebrate festivals.
Yeah.
But here, he's making the point that starting big projects, we see that. This goes on. I've seen it many times. You've seen it many times over the last 50 years. We've seen it. The main point is, like the statement, one must refrain from making many, many disciples and reading many types of shastras. Why?
You're going to be splayed out.
No, not splayed out. No, that's not the reason. The reason is that this will be a distraction from bhakti. Even a bhakti festival can become like that.
It's called Bhakti Fest.
Bhakti
Yes.
fest.
Well, that doesn't even begin with actual bhakti, you see. That's a sense enjoyment fest. So the thing is, it is not that, well, we've seen our acharyas, they have very large-scale festivals and lots of cooking and everything on the most important days like Krishna Janmashtami and so forth. They do observe important festivals. That is bhakti. That is bhakti. Because it's done according to one's means. But if there is a big, huge project that is way, way beyond one's means, and one is endeavoring too much, that's called prayas. It's one of the 6 items. that causes bhakti to go down. Over endeavor for material things that are too difficult to achieve. But if one is endeavoring very diligently for some project to serve Krishna and Guru and Vaishnavas, then it's bhakti. I'll give an example. Srila Bharati Maharaj, he's very nicely explained how his Guru Maharaj, Bhakti Dayata Madhava Swami Maharaj, was requested by the God brothers, by his God brothers, disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He was requested to do something that they had been endeavoring to do, but they could not accomplish it. What was that? To acquire the property where Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was born in Jagannath Puri. That very property. This was back in like the late 70s, okay? Just after our Prabhupada left the planet. So, but those other God brothers, they were endeavoring to acquire that property because they considered that this is so very important that we have possession and we can build a proper temple and samadhi and so forth for Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So they had made quite an endeavor. There was a group of them. It's all written in the book, My Beloved Masters, or volcanic energy. Yeah, and so they approached him. And Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj especially spoke on behalf of the God brothers. And when the God brothers were meeting together, they came to the conclusion that we should request Bhakti Dayata Madhav Maharaj to do this because he has volcanic energy, literally. And Srila Sridhar Maharaj said, when we have exhausted all of our efforts, right? We've come to that point that our efforts and our energy and everything, it's now exhausted and we cannot attain the result of what we're endeavoring for. When that happens to us, that's only the starting point for Bhakti Dayata Madhav Maharaj. That's his starting point. So they approached him. And throughout his whole life, he had proven doing so many projects that were very difficult to accomplish. But he was very expert at that. He was known for that. So he accepted very humbly the order of his God brothers. And then his seva began. And through very ardent endeavor, he succeeded. And he was able to acquire that property, you see. So, the next item is satisfaction and equal vision. I haven't read this yet, so I'm wondering, what does that mean? Satisfaction and equal vision, okay? The endeavor for food and clothing will always exist in both household life and renounced life. But one must always be careful in such dealings. The Padma Purana gives a very beautiful instruction in this regards. Here's the verse. Alabdeva vinashdeva bhakyas-chadana sadhane aviklava matir bhutva harinamaiva dhyasmaret. The purport is that whether a sadhak stays at home or in the forest, he will certainly have to make some endeavor for food and clothing. A householder will have to endeavor for his food and his clothing through agriculture, business, or work. A renunciant will have to depend on begging alms for his food and clothing. Devotees are not to be agitated at heart if, upon engaging in these activities, that food and clothing are not obtained. Or if they are obtained but then lost. should not be disturbed in heart. They are to continue being peacefully engaged in Krishna bhajan. Understand? What did it say?
I didn't really understand it.
Okay.
Well, is it like what it says in Bhagavad Gita that we're not supposed to be attached to the fruits, we're just supposed to do basically our seva, but don't be attached to the fruit. So you just do the amount of work or whatever that you need to get enough food and shelter and clothing, and how that manifests is up to Krishna.
Yeah, partially that's part of
What were you
it.
going to say? I'm sorry.
Just remember something about Gita and a purport also that says that for that person, for the soul, realized soul, he, a piece of gold means the same as a piece of stone.
Mm-hmm.
Like that.
Yeah. But what's the main instruction being given here? The main instruction is that in any stage of life in this material world, basic necessities such as food and clothing will have to be endeavored for, to obtain them. Now, Bhaktivinoda Thakur is explaining that for a householder, they acquire these items through various work and so forth, agriculture, business, or any type of work. But in the case of a renunciate, sannyasi, of course, this is talking about sannyasis of, the Vedic times, when sannyasis were recognized in society, and they would go door to door begging. Prabhupada told, he said, this is not possible to practice in Western countries. You go door to door begging, and then they will call the police on you, okay? So there's a shift, there's a change, but the basic principle is this, okay? Sometimes the acquirement of these items is a very simple thing, it automatically happens. But then sometimes one may have to work harder and endeavor harder. So sometimes one may acquire these things, but he should not be agitated in his heart. And when he acquires these things, when he engages in the activities to acquire these things, his heart should be peaceful. That's why the term is satisfaction is in the title of this section, to always be satisfied, right? And he's saying that if even despite your endeavor, these necessary items are not obtained, or on the other hand, they're obtained, but then they're lost. How should the devotee take this? How should the devotee control his mind and senses and be peaceful in heart? They should continue to be peacefully engaged in Krishna bhajan. This is the thing. One should never be in some state of lamentation and bewilderment, because these things may be lacking at some point in time. You see. Now the next section is called sadness. Sadness is to be cast off in bhakti. Sadness should be cast off. He's explaining, those who are absorbed in material life, they lament grossly if they lose their wife, their children, their money, their wealth, and so on. These are for persons that are absorbed in material life. But bhakti sadhakas in such situations must not lament for very long. Initially, some, but they should not lament for very long. They should quickly give up their lamentation, and they should engage in the cultivation of Krishna consciousness. It is not appropriate for a renunciant to lament if he does not possess a quilt, a water pot, or a begging bowl, or if these things are stolen by a person or by an animal. A practicing Vaishnava must give up all impulses like lamentation and anger. Otherwise, there will be obstacles in his constant remembrance of Krishna. It is explained in the Padma Purana, Shoka marshadi bir bhavayar akrantam yasya manasam katam tasya mukundasya spurti sambhavana bhavet. This, we've seen this statement in Bhajan Rahasya and many other places. This is an often quoted verse from the Padma Purana, and it's included in Nectar of Devotion, in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. What is the meaning of this verse? It says, the question is being asked, how can Sri Mukunda, Krishna, how can Sri Mukunda ever be manifest to a person whose heart is invaded by lamentation, by anger, and other agitations? That's the question being asked in the Padma Purana. Is it possible? No. The answer is no. Mukunda can never manifest in a person's heart who is overwhelmed by lamentation, anger, and other agitations. So this is a devotional principle. That the Vaishnava should never be overwhelmed by sadness. It should be cast off. No matter what happens in life, no matter what happens in life, the devotee should be ready at any single moment to simply take shelter of Krishna. Everything can suddenly be taken away in a single moment. Our very body can be taken away in a single moment. What to speak of other persons' bodies that are connected with us? Or our wealth can be taken away. Our health can be taken away. So many things can suddenly be removed. How does a devotee deal with this? Steadiness in Krishna bhajan. Initially, it may come as a little bit of a shock, but he has to take control of his emotions and be mature in his bhakti, and face that as Krishna's will. Okay, Krishna has willed. No problem, no problem. Krishna's always there. Does Krishna ever go away? Does Krishna ever go away? No, only we go away from him. But he's with us right here in our heart. Everything that's happening to us in our life, good and bad, is actually all good, because Krishna is arranging it for us. So we should never come under the spell of illusion and lamentation, anger, all of this. This is not the life of a devotee. Not the life of a devotee at all. And neither does a devotee try to gain so many things and endeavor and spend all of his energy doing that. No. Very simple life. Simple life. Accepting what Krishna has provided. That's all. Devotee does not have to become a big anything in this material world. Not even a big devotee. Because that's a problem if someone thinks, I'm a big devotee. You see? So simple and humble. Trinadapi sunichena. No matter what happens in our life, Krishna is always there. And this is what Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj continually talks about. The environment is actually Krishna. And if you look just behind the curtain of the environment, what will you see? Krishna's smiling face. He's always there for his devotee. So we have to go through all these tests in life, one by one. We have to go through all these tests. And by going through those tests, we become stronger and stronger and more steady and more dedicated, more surrendered, everything. And our life becomes happy. And by being surrendered to Krishna, all happiness comes. You cannot be unhappy if you're surrendered to Krishna. It's not possible to be unhappy. So all these temporary things may occur in our lives. And they will occur. To one degree or another, everyone will have to go through these tests. But the test is, are you forgetting Krishna or are you remembering him? That's the test. And depending on him. Depending on him. I'll do one more. Actually, I don't really have to. That's right, I forgot. I forgot. Yeah. Okay. So the next section is the worship of various demigods and goddesses is prohibited. It is Sri Krishna alone who is to be worshipped. So if any devotee tells you, oh, you should worship Lord Shiva, oh, you should worship Durga, oh, you should worship such and such, and you can get so many benedictions and boons, that person is bogus. He's not a devotee. No devotee will ever worship demigods. It is not that they're disrespecting. No, there's also a rule that one should not disrespect the demigods because they're also Vaishnavas. But they are not our object of worship. Our object of worship is one only, our Ishtadeva, Shri Krishna, Radha Krishna, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Only one.
Can I say something? No, and the reason we don't worship them is because even the demigods want to come back here to planet Earth, and so that they can worship Krishna in the correct way. You know, because once they get done with all that, even Lord Brahma, all that, everything, they still have to come back here.
Lord Brahma doesn't come back.
Not Lord Brahma.
No, the higher demigods, not the lower demigods, yes, they have to return back. But not the higher demigods because they're pure devotees. They're pure devotees. They're engaged in Krishna's service.
Oh, sorry.
They go to the spiritual world.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. But you're correct in saying that in general, Kshine, there's actually a verse in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains this. Kshine punye martya lokam vishanti. He's describing how by worshipping the demigods, one can go to the planets of the demigods, but as long as their punya, it's like a bank account, you know? Like you're going to a high-class hotel. You're going to stay at the hotel and you have to pay your bill, right? To be able to live there. So similarly, the people who go to the heavenly planets, they have a bank account of punya, pious activities, which brought them there. But actually it's getting used up. It's getting used up because it's material enjoyment there. They don't get any kind of punishment for material enjoyment. They're only living out the results of their previous punya, pious activities on the earthly plane. And as long as they still have money in their account, they still have punya, they can remain there. But then Krishna says, Kshine punye. When your punya has diminished, then martya lokam vishanti. Again, they have to return to the world of birth and death. Because in the demigods' planets, they live very, very long time. And it feels to them like it's forever. But it's not. And so they have to come back to the world of birth and death. Martya Loka, this earth planet, this middle planetary system is called Martya Loka, the place of death. Martya means death. So everyone has to die. So in this way, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur is explaining that the sadhakas of bhakti, they should worship Sri Krishna only, no one else. They are not to worship various demigods. But it is important to remember to never disrespect any demigod or any scripture. So when coming before any demigods, one must offer them respect, knowing them to be servants who are under the authority of Sri Krishna. So the Padma Purana instructs in this way. It says, Harir eva sadaradhya sarva deveshvareshvara itare brahma rudradhya navagyeya kadachana. The purport is that Parameshwar is the one and only worshipable object. What does the word Parameshwar mean? Do you know? Do you know the word Parameshwar?
I mean, I've heard Krishna?
No, the word Parameshwar. What does it
The
mean?
highest object of worship?
No.
supreme controller.
That's right. Ishvara means controller and Param means supreme. So the supreme controller, his name is Parameshwar. And he's only one. There's not two Parameshwars. There's only one. So the Padma Purana is telling that Parameshwar is the one and the only worshipable object. Others, such as Brahma and Shiva, they are his manifestations that govern the modes of material nature in this universe. Guna avatars, they're called. They're avatars of the three qualities, the gunas. What are the three qualities? Sattva gun, Rajagun, Tamagun. Goodness, passion, and ignorance. Brahma, Shiva, and so forth. They're demigods of the gunas of this world. So according to their respective qualifications, people worship particular demigods. But Bhagavan Vishnu is the only worshipful object for those with a sattvic nature. What does sattvic mean? You know this word, sattvic? You don't? Sattvic means mode of goodness. Sattvic. Sattvika, yes. So sattvic means mode of goodness. Sattva gun. Sattva, rajas, tamas. Sattva. So a person who has a sattvic nature, he will only worship Bhagavan Vishnu, no demigods. But people that are in mode of passion and so forth, they worship very different demigods. People progress gradually, transcending the modes after having worshipped various demigods for many lifetimes. So a person's life becomes eternally auspicious from that birth in which he begins worshipping Vishnu, considering him exclusively to be the Supreme Lord. Sri Krishna is the topmost manifestation of Vishnu Tattva. As a result of the living entities performing worship in the mode of goodness, Sattva Gun, he attains the stage of Nirgun, that means freedom from the modes of nature. And he then attains service to Sri Krishna Tattva. So Sri Krishna Tattva, what does that mean? Sri Krishna Tattva.
Tattva means truth.
Yeah.
So, the truth about Sri Krishna.
That's right. So give an example of Krishna Tattva.
Sri Krishna
We just heard
reality.
it.
Sri Krishna reality is beautiful. 100%.
Yeah, so go on. What is, if somebody knows and worships Krishna Tattva, this is what's being discussed here.
You're worshiping the Supreme Controller.
That's right. Because the Tattva of Krishna is that he is the Supreme Controller and everyone is controlled by him. Not only that, but all of the expansions of Krishna, such as Lord Vishnu and so forth, they are all his expansions. He is the original from whom all expand. And when someone understands these truths, they understand clearly that actually Krishna is the only one and only absolute truth, Supreme Controller. And all of the expansions and incarnations are coming from him. So Krishna Tattva means also Vishnu, also the various demigods and so forth. They're all underneath Krishna. They're included in his tattva. But the demigods are jivas, whereas Krishna and his expansions, they're Bhagavan. They're the absolute truth. So he says that a person's life becomes eternally auspicious from that birth. After many lifetimes of worshipping demigods, he's saying. So his life now becomes eternally auspicious from that birth in which he begins worshipping Vishnu, considering him exclusively to be the Supreme Lord. And Sri Krishna is the topmost manifestation of Vishnu Tattva, because he's the source. So as a result of the living entities performing worship in the mode of goodness, Sattva Gun, then he attains the stage of Nirgun, freedom from the modes of material nature, and then he attains service to Sri Krishna Tattva. Very beautiful way how Bhaktivinoda Thakur is explaining this. Yes. So I think that will be enough for today. And tomorrow we'll continue with these items. There's so much more nectar to come, so much nectar to come. You should stay for tomorrow night's class because you came late today. You usually come in the morning on Saturdays.
Yeah. No.
Oh.
Sometimes.
You come in the afternoon?
Yeah, after.
Yeah. Okay, but this time you only arrived just before the class. You came in the night.
It's night.
Yes, so that means you have to make up for it tomorrow and you have to stay one more night.
So is class now like at 6:30ish? Is that the new thing that they're doing RT first and then class?
It's not been established, it's just that I was very, very much engaged the whole day, nonstop, literally nonstop. And finally, I ate something. I didn't even eat lunch today. And then I came immediately to give class. So I was a little late, and in the meantime, he did the RT. But that's okay, because we can do it either way. We have that agreement with Jai Govinda that if he sees that it's not starting, then he just goes and does the RT. That also allows him, because he has certain time limits for him. So in this way, it usually, if I'm doing it, if I'm giving the class before the RT, which is more favorable for some of the devotees, because some of the devotees, they don't attend the RT and they go back to their home.
Like for Braj tonight. Braj
Well,
couldn't
Braj
sit.
has been ill. He has also been sick. You know, he came, but then he didn't feel well. But like Rishabdev Prabhu, he usually doesn't stay for the RT after. You know, so it's better to start. I usually start between 6 and 6:15. That's the starting time. And we're finished by 7 to 7:15. That's the usual time. But this time, he did the Artik before, and I think I started the class at about 10 minutes to 7, something like that. So about an hour. About an hour. Yeah, that's the problem.
But I just want to ask, but maybe, obviously this is probably like a huge subject, but Lord Chaitanya is the same as Krishna, right?
Yes, he is Krishna.
That's what I'm saying.
He's not the same as, he is Krishna.
Okay. I read Teachings of Lord Chaitanya. It's one of my favorite books. Okay, anyway, that was my question. So he's the same as Krishna.
Yes,
okay.
yeah. So now the question comes that Krishna, no, you'll know the answer. You'll know the answer. Don't worry. The question comes, if he's the same as Krishna, if he is Krishna himself, then why is he not bluish color?
Because he's Radha and Krishna combined.
Yes.
So he's taken Radha's golden color.
That's exactly true. See, I knew that you would know that answer.
Well, I love Lord Chaitanya.
Yeah,
that's
good.
Saving and learning. It's not funny.
Yeah. That's very good.
It's the ticket. And not only that, I'm sorry. First, we have to go to, first we get to be with Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda, and then we get promoted to be with Radha and Krishna.
Yes, it doesn't necessarily only happen in that order.
All right.
Because Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains in the Jaiva Dharma that for some of the Gaur Bhaktas, those who are worshippers of Lord Chaitanya, they also have more attachment and attraction to Lord Chaitanya than to Radha and Krishna. And for them, they will go to the spiritual world and they will take a form, a body in Lord Chaitanya's Leelas in Goloka Vrindavan.
And just stay there.
And no, I'm not finished.
Okay.
Then there's another category of devotee of Lord Chaitanya who has more attraction to Krishna's Leelas and pastimes in Vrindavan. So that devotee will go to Goloka Vrindavan and take the form of a gopi or so and live there. But he says that a very special benediction is given in this age of Kali, those who worship Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that if they have very equal attraction to Mahaprabhu as well as to Radha and Krishna, then they will take two separate forms simultaneously. in both Leelas. Yes. The soul will be able to participate simultaneously, eternally, in both Lord Chaitanya's pastimes in Goloka Vrindavan and also Radha and Krishna's pastimes. Have you heard that before?
Never heard that.
I have.
That is there in the Jaiva Dharma. That's mentioned by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Yes.
That Jaiva Dharma is very, very hard for me.
But it'll become easier as time goes by. Because you're a pretty smart cookie. I've noticed this. You're a pretty smart cookie, Rhonda.
It's not
So,
even about,
but you have to focus more.
yeah, focus.
That's the thing. You have to focus more. And every day, you just be very simple and humble and chant your rounds and be with the devotees and do your seva. And gradually, you'll see, you know what will happen? You'll start to understand things. See, we don't have to be great scholars and intellectuals or any of that, because this knowledge is internally realized. It's not just that if you study so much, then you realize it. No. You have to have the mood of worship to Krishna and the mood of service, you see. So gradually, because I'm sure that you didn't feel like this, as you just expressed, that you love Lord Chaitanya. I'm sure this didn't happen on the first day.
No.
It happened after so much time.
You know who it happened by.
What?
Srila Maharaj.
Well, okay,
That's
but
how,
it not
that's
easy.
how it happened.
But Srila Sridhar Maharaj is one of many personalities that you've been exposed to. You've been exposed to Srila Prabhupada's teachings, Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Maharaj's teachings, and so forth. And so we don't have only one
No,
guru.
we do not.
We
Guru is
have
one
many
anyway.
gurus. We have many gurus.
Definitely.
We have many
Of
gurus,
course.
Siksha gurus, Diksha guru, and so forth. You see? So in this way, Krishna manifests for the devotees and gradually enlightens the devotees. Okay.
You were mentioning something about Jaiva Dharma that you were gonna, I think.
Yeah,
you were gonna-
but the thing is, I had already been doing, before Kartik, I'd already been doing classes on Upadeshamrita. And we had a goal that we were going to complete the Upadeshamrita study of the 3 commentaries of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and Srila Prabhupada's commentary. And there's one more from one Acharya hundreds of years ago in Vrindavan named Radharaman Goswami. So he also made a commentary. So we studied these. But as we were beginning from verse 1 of Upadeshamrita, I desired to read this separate book from Bhaktivinoda Thakur, which is included in Gurudev's Upadeshamrita, the new printing of his Upadeshamrita. So what we've been reading is directly written by Bhaktivinoda Thakur on those 2 verses. And we're making good progress. We'll soon be finished with that, because it's 12 essays, as I mentioned in the beginning. 6 and 6, 12. So these 12 essays were on item number, number 9, the 9th item out of 12. So after this, we have 2 more items. And then we'll be finished with Bhaktivinoda Thakur's book. And then I will do an overview of the 11 verses of Upadeshamrita. And then we'll be complete with that study. Then we can go on to the Jaiva Dharma. Like this. Jaiva Dharma is long. And it will take a lot of time to complete the Jaiva Dharma. But it will be very, very beneficial. But there's other books that I also want to read. I also want to do studies of. In fact, do you know that on Christmas this year, the Christmas day, the 25th of this month, that's actually Ekadasi, and it's also called Gita Jayanti that day on our Vaishnava calendar. It's Gita Jayanti, and it means the day that Sri Krishna spoke the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna. It's the annual celebration of that day. So it's very powerful to read Bhagavad Gita leading up to that day, you see, and after as well. So
the same day as Ekadasi?
Yeah,
Oh, same.
yeah, it's on Ekadasi day. Yeah. Okay, any other questions or comments?
Is that a prerequisite before you get the Jaiva Dharma, all the 12 essays and all that? It's
No,
not.
it's not a prerequisite. It's just the
So we were talking about,
you know, the idea to do the Jaiva Dharma came up. I think you were here on that day.
No, I just.
Oh, but anyway, you've heard that we had a discussion and we decided, okay, we'll start reading the Jaiva Dharma. Here the devotees have had some readings, I think twice already. They've read through the Jaiva Dharma on their own when there's no sannyasi preacher here. They just sit together and they read. But just doing that will not be sufficient. You have to study it. You have to have some explanation and discussion, and then it stays, it gets fixed. So we'll do that with the Jaiva Dharma because, I mean, the Jaiva Dharma is Bhaktivinoda Thakur's presentation of the essence of all of the literatures, the Goswami literatures, and, you know, Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, the whole philosophy that is presented by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his followers under Rupa Goswami. He has given that in this one book. So Srila Gurudev used to say, it is as if he has taken an entire ocean and placed it in one small vessel. This is the Jaiva Dharma. And Gurudev has expressed many, many times that he had a very, very liking for Jaiva Dharma, and he said he's read it 100 times in his life. And he used to say sometimes, you know why I can answer any question? Because I've read Jaiva Dharma so many times. Yeah. So Prabhupada, you know, he came ultimately with the objective that the books he's giving will be like the basis, and then gradually all the other books of our acharyas and 6 Goswamis will gradually get translated and they'll all be available. So we're at that point now, where most of the books of the previous acharyas have been translated. And in the future there will be more translations from realized Vaishnavas. More translations, more presentations, like that. Okay, so for those who are watching on Facebook, my Dandavat Pranams to all of you. And we'll be resuming again tomorrow with the continuation of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's 12 essays on Sri Upadeshamrita. Gaur Premanandi, Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namah. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Jai Shri Shri Nitai Gauranga ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Govinda ki Jai Jai Shri Rupa Goswami Pada ki Jai Shri Bhakti Vinod Thakur ki Jai Shri Rupa Nuga Guru Varga ki Jai Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari. Vrindai Tulsi Devai Priyai Keshavasya Ja Krishna Bhakti Pradadevi Satyavachai Namo Nama Mancha Kalpataruvascha Kripa Sindhu Raja Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo.
Thank you, thank you.
I have to stop that.